Hello, everyone. I am so sorry that my March recording had such terrible sound. Thanks to those that are sharing microphones with me. Um, and then I'm also sorry it took me so long to get this re-recorded. Finding 2 hours in my schedule was not easy to find. So here are the updates. We're going to be talking about some general updates across Southern Plains, some updates from a survey that I conducted recently, where we're at with monitoring, some general reminders at this time of year, and then some things that have been happening in SPED forms. So updates across Southern Plains. You may have heard a rumor that Jackson County Central would be joining Southern Plains. We have had some conversations going on with Jackson County Central. However, we don't have any immediate plans. There is definitely some interest, but there have to be a lot more conversations yet. So no immediate plans. Some staff changes for 2017-18. Lisa Ellingson will be retiring this year, and Deb Bertram, who is from Martin County West and has 32 years of special education experience, will be taking her position, and we're excited to have Deb on board. Jane Catava, who is a school nurse for Grenada, Truman, and Winnebago, will be retiring for the second time, and we welcome Brittany Kowecki into that position. Susan Krieger will be retiring, and she services Trimont and Truman, and Kendra Maddox will be taking her position. Kendra has been working as a community expert in ECSE for the past year, but she is a licensed and very experienced speech pathologist, and we're excited to put her into that position. Amy Pearson, who is the school psychologist at United South Central and Blue Earth, has resigned, and we are still looking for that position. Karen DeWar is an occupational therapist servicing Fairmont, Birth to Three, and Grenada, and she will be retiring for the second time, but she's coming back. She's failing retirement miserably. We will be making some ongoing reductions in that area, and she will be doing just some Birth to Three, and we will be doing some rearranging of occupational therapy. So we will have more information for you in the fall of exactly what that will look like. But we will be doing some rearranging in that area. As I mentioned, Kendra has been filling in ECSE for the past year, kind of in the Faribault County area, a little bit in Martin County as well. She will become a speech pathologist. So Sonia Massey, who is a ECSE teacher from Jackson County Central, will be joining us. So we're really excited to have a great new team. We are looking for a school psychologist and or psychometrist, possibly a couple of positions there. This is an area where there is a significant need at the moment across the nation. Recently, I got an email from a company that hires positions like this, and I went to their website to kind of get an idea of how many school psychologists they employed. And they had posted, they are a nationwide company, and they had posted looking for school psychologists. They had 2,522 positions open in the last month. So there's kind of a nationwide concern in this area, and really re-looking at the positions and what we can do as a result of the significant shortage. And so we have a number of different options we're looking at for this coming year. We'll definitely make sure that all of the needs are met. But excited about the new year starting, and lots of new and experienced people joining us this next year. A couple of months ago, I sent out a survey. I didn't get a great response, but I did get a fairly broad-based response from a wide variety of people. And what I found overall was that special education in our member districts is going really well. People feel very comfortable, particularly in the area of paperwork. Everyone feels we're doing a pretty good job in that area. Academics are going very well. Behavior is our tougher area, not necessarily poorly, but people are definitely looking for some help in the area of behavior. So I'm hoping to start addressing that and finding some routes of how we can go about that. People are very pleased with the services they're getting, both the services that we're providing to students in all areas, learning disabilities, behavioral needs, that kind of thing, as well as the specific services they're getting from Southern Plains. A few isolated concerns, and we're always going to have that, but overall, the survey was very positive. Coordinators specifically was that people are very pleased, and we certainly know we have a great number of coordinators and great services that they provide. There was a common theme that we wish they could be there everywhere at every moment, and people recognizing they can't necessarily do that. Most people recognize that and see that there are sometimes frustrations with the coordinators, but recognizing that that is the reason for the coordinators. A reminder to all of you is that their number one priority that they have and why we've set them up in this model is that Southern Plains is responsible for the services that are provided out in the districts, and something that principals are not able to address is the due process, particularly in a year like this past year when we were going through monitoring. And that's the number one reason why we have those coordinators there, because I can't possibly be there for all of that, and teachers can't possibly remember all the rules we have. So just keep in mind a reminder that that is their number one priority, but we are blessed that we have enough that they're able to go out and help in other areas as well. Paperwork parties were something that overall people really appreciated. Some people have recognized that it just isn't a good fit for them. But a few reminders is that we do need to have a minimum of 15 to 20 to keep these cost effective. Really at a minimum, I'd like to see it closer to 25. And also another reminder is that you're welcome to go to any of the sites, and that people do cross over and they drive, and I realize that it's not always ideal to be driving at night, but you are welcome to go to any of those sites, and we do have a lot of people that drive to the different sites along the way. Some conversations about the facilities for Southern Plains, and you've probably seen this out there. I recently sent out an email. There are conversations going on regarding the facilities in Winnebago. These conversations come about because the Winnebago facility has worked great for us. We have appreciated having all of our programs in one site. That has been huge and really helped improve programming for students, is much safer for staff, and provides better quality of instruction. However, the building that we ended up in Winnebago, Blue Earth has been great to work with us, but the building has a lot of deferred maintenance issues. In order to get it up to a point where it's really just where we're addressing those deferred maintenance and helping meet the unique needs of the students we have, it's been estimated at $8 million. This is not for anything fancy or extra. This is really just basic pieces, such as the windows haven't been replaced unless they were leaking. They haven't been replaced in years. The ventilation system, we put a brand new boiler in the system in the building a year ago because the old one was not working. However, the ventilation system that the brand new boiler works in is still a very old system and makes it very hard to run, and is not real efficient. So we are looking at a variety of options, looking at ways that we can go about that. I'm very open. I will tell you, I've probably looked at about 30 different facilities over the past few years, but there still might be some magic out there. But it does take a lot to run a facility and to keep it up. We're not looking for anything fancy, but really just trying to meet the needs of students. However, the other options that have been talked about is putting our programs, spreading them out all over, intermixing them with other students, and that does get to become a problem as well and is not a real ideal situation, but many options are available. So just know we're not looking at throwing away a lot of money. We just need to look at what options are available. And there will be more conversations about that in the near future. With the Winnebago programs, there were a lot of comments about it being too hard to get into those programs and too hard to that the program that either it's not a smooth transition out or they're trying to push students out too early. And I want to show you some information. This data shows what percentage of the students that are serviced in special education, where they are serviced. Setting 1 means they're in the mainstream classroom the majority of the day. And the state average is 53% of students. And you will see that almost all of our school districts are over that 53%. Research says the more we can keep kids with their peers, the better the students are able to achieve. And so we are doing fairly well in that area, but not every student needs to be in the mainstream classroom at all times. Sometimes we do need to look at other options and do need to pull them out more, possibly even to the point where we would place them in like a setting 4 program such as Winnebago. And you'll see here that 3.3% of the special education students across the state of Minnesota are in a program such as Winnebago. Our districts typically are well over that amount. Now, some of this we have to consider with a grain of salt. For example, Grenada Huntley East Chain has 11% of their special education students in Winnebago, but that 11% is actually only 2 students, and it happens to be 2 of our most severe autistic students in the PALS program. That doesn't mean they're over-identifying. Somebody in the state has to be high. But I would say across the board, it's not real often that we are over-identifying or under-identifying students in a setting 4. We service a lot of students. The programs in Winnebago have grown astronomically the last few years. It is a very big deal to put students into those programs, but it's also very difficult to send the students back into less restrictive environments, such as setting 3, 2, or 1. The reason for that is oftentimes the students, once they get sent to Winnebago, they feel as they were very rejected by their home school district and are not motivated to return to that home district. Additionally, staff often have preconceived ideas or remember what that student was like prior to going to Winnebago, and they struggle with having the student return. They also expect that we will fix the student and the student will become a perfect student. And the reality is no students are perfect and we can't fix those students. So we will be having more conversations about this, but I just wanted to make you aware of what these numbers look like and where we're at with this. This is a little alarming to me that we're seeing such a huge increase in the number of students in Winnebago. And we want to make sure that we are keeping students in their least restrictive environment, whichever setting it is. Monitoring has wrapped up at this point in time. We took some of the files and had to send them in to the Minnesota Department of Education, and we had pretty good results. We did have a couple of additional areas that were cited by the Department of Education, but they were fairly minimal. In all honesty, the Minnesota Department of Ed felt that we had probably cited, we were plenty harsh on ourselves. We were very fair. And so the monitoring validation went very well. We fixed as much as we could. We had one file we couldn't fix because the student had moved out of the district. Unfortunately, that file had a whole lot of citations in it. And then we had a number of files that had issues with progress monitoring. And that was pretty common across all of the districts where those progress reports are not getting completed or they're not getting numbers and quantifiable data in that progress report. And still occasionally a few issues where people don't check one of the boxes. So by the end of the month, I have to write a corrective action plan for that. I will be working with the Department of Education, writing that corrective action plan, and you can anticipate that next year you're going to hear a lot of me hounding you on getting those progress reports completed. Some legal updates for you. The Supreme Court heard a case that had to do with special education, and that's kind of a big deal. The attorneys are really excited about this. It did not turn in favor for school districts, but I do not anticipate this will be a huge difference for us. Previously, there was a standard that was called the Rowley Standard, which was another Supreme Court case many years ago. And the Rowley Standard was that students had to make minimal progress in order to be considered that the district had done an adequate job for them. This case changed that standard a bit and really talks about that you have to show that the student made reasonable progress given their circumstances. Now, this is no different than any of the guidance I've ever given. To help explain that a little bit more, if you have a student that's a nonverbal, low IQ, severely cognitively impaired student, you're not going to expect as much progress as a student with average ability and learning disability. We would expect that a student with a learning disability would make at least 1 year's gain every year. And that's really what this case was. I don't anticipate this will change our world. However, be aware that more parents and advocate groups are fighting for this and helping trying to raise this bar. As a matter of fact, since this case, there have been 13 federal cases that have been heard, really to help clarify what does this new standard mean? How do we measure what is adequate progress for students with disabilities? I don't think this will be a big deal in our area, but data is more and more important. So just be aware that that whole progress report piece is really important, that we're collecting good data on student progress and responding if students are not making progress, if students continue to have behavior issues or their data on their goals is not increasing. We do need to have meetings and be sure we're responding to that. Some Minnesota laws that are being proposed out there. One has to do with the academic and behavioral strategist licensure. This was added a few years ago. That's kind of a broad spectrum, allows individuals to work with all students that have mild to moderate disabilities. However, within 5 years, a person with an ABS license must go back and add on what they call an anchor license, LD, EBD, DCD, or autism. There's a lot of conflict associated with that. It's the only license that requires somebody goes back to school within 5 years and causes a lot of problems for students and for staff. So this is really something that's being pushed to try to get rid of that requirement that they go back to school to get that anchor license. One thing that's been mentioned several times over the last few years is a statewide due process forms, such as SPED forms, only it would be a different vendor than SPED forms, and every school district in the state would need to use that software system. This keeps coming up over and over, and just be aware, a reminder, as you have a chance to talk to Education Minnesota and legislators and that kind of thing, that a software system is probably not going to reduce our paperwork. I don't see that the software system is the problem. The problem is there are a lot of laws that require us to do a lot of paperwork. And the software in and of itself, SPED forms makes it much easier for us versus those of us that lived back in the dinosaur days where we hand wrote them. It is really nice having them on a statewide, on a electronic system. But if we're all using the same system, I don't know that it would make a big difference, especially because it would not be SPED forms, and nearly 90% of the school districts in the state of Minnesota do use SPED forms. So the only advantage would be when students move in and out. But the only students that seem to move into our districts move in from Iowa. So those are some changes that are likely to be coming or that will be heard this year, have been heard this year, and we will see where those go. Some general reminders. We already did our April 1st evaluation. Oh, wait, no. If you have an IEP or an evaluation that is due by November 1st of this coming year and you anticipate that that file is going on to a new case manager, please get that done before the end of this school year. It is very hard for a new case manager to write an IEP within the first 2 weeks of the school year when they don't know that student. If you don't get it written, we will be knocking on your door and you will be asked to get that done. IEP team membership attendance. I've had a lot of questions about are related service providers required team members. such as occupational therapy, speech therapy if a student gets services as a secondary disability, that kind of thing. No, they are not required team members. However, it does not mean that they are not an important team member. It is very important that those team members stay to the end of the IEP meeting whenever possible. Certainly, it's not always possible if a occupational therapist works with 50 to 60 students. It's hard to get to all of those IEP meetings, and sometimes it's just not possible. But it's not okay for somebody to say, hey, I've got to go to my child's track meet, I got to go. That's really sending a poor message to parents. So be sure you're careful about that. Try to stay to the end of the meeting if at all possible. If you can't, notify them right up front. And make sure that all of your information is discussed at the meeting. And again, it should be a rare event that somebody cannot stay until the end of the meeting. Particularly for the students when there's a lot of controversy or highly involved students, that type of thing. Just because you're not a required team member does not mean you're not important. Extended school year, be sure that you change any IEPs if it says more data needed. Before the end of the school year, it must say yes or no on the IEP. ECSE staff, make sure you're helping. This is a little late on this one. You should have had a meeting where the kindergarten special education staff are invited, but be sure you're at least communicating with those kindergarten special education staff and that IEP is ready to go and addressed for kindergarten. I have a checklist for end of the year cleanup. Be sure your files get cleaned up and ready for a new school year, and that they're ready for the new case manager next year. I had a number of people recommend this video. It is a great video on some great strategies, and especially with our needs in the area of addressing behavior. It's a free video that you click. I think you have to enter your email address, but there is no fee associated with it, with some really good strategies. I'm going to go through SPED forms and share some updates that have happened in SPED forms recently. If you look at the prior written notice, at the bottom of the form, there's a box here that says procedural safeguards were offered to the parents. You can ignore this box. This does not get printed on SPED forms. The only thing that it does is when you finalize the form, it goes into the history one that goes in the history files on SPED forms. We keep track of this on our team sign-in form. This was just a request by other districts, so just ignore this piece and you don't need to pay attention to that. We're also going to take a look at the IEP. There was a change on the service page, and it has to do with altered school days. Under least restrictive environment, it says altered school day. This is a really big deal to have students on an altered school day. If you are as old as I am, you will recall that at one time we had to have the signature from somebody at the Department of Education if the student was on an altered school day. So you would need to explain here not only why a student has an altered school day, but what's your plan to get that student back to a full school day. It should be extremely rare and only if a student is medically fragile that you would ever not increase their school day. And what is that student missing when they are not in school? And that can either go in the LRE or in the altered school day. But this is a really big deal, and we want to make sure that we're only doing this in a rare event. If we go to the state assessment pages, there is a new box that says parents have requested in writing that their child not participate in statewide assessments. Again, we don't want to encourage parents to say, hey, you don't have to have your child tested, but if they do request that, here would be a box that you could just check. You would also want to have that parent request in writing. I would encourage you to put that in their special education file or have that around. Make sure that somebody is going to be able to access that if a parent does request that. We're going to go to the classroom accommodations page down here. So here are all the pages of the IEP. The last page is the classroom accommodations page. There was some reformatting on this page recently just to help it align a little better. But a reminder, if you go to print the IEP, this page does not get selected automatically. If you select all, that page does not get selected automatically because everything in that page is a duplicate that has been reported somewhere else in the IEP. So don't put this in the SPED forms, in the classification file, or send this to the parents. It gets confusing. However, it is a really great tool to send to the classroom teacher. So you could make a copy for them, and that would be where I would recommend that you do that. Another change that has happened in the IEP is the present level page above the goals. So sometimes people will fill in just the present level, but they won't have a goal. Maybe there previously was a fine motor goal and we no longer need that. So they fill in the present level but then not put in the goal. You can no longer finalize the IEP if there's a present level and there is no goal. If you do have some kind of notes that you feel like need to go into a present level that you don't want a goal, what I would suggest is that you put those notes over under the basic present level page on page 2 of the IEP. So just be aware that if you have only a present level and you don't have a goal or objectives, you're not going to be able to finalize that IEP. There are updates on SPED forms. Also a quick, I had mentioned earlier that you need to make sure that you are getting all of the IEPs to change from more data needed to yes or no. And also sometimes it's nice to know where the students are, which students have yes written on their IEP in a quick way. So if you go to reports, click on quick, scroll down, and you will find a report that is ESY students including more data needed. And I don't have any on this file, but you can get the report here. You can see them directly or you can download an Excel spreadsheet. So there are some updates for you. I hope you all have a great summer. Please thoroughly enjoy your summer. Remember to keep teaching till the end of the year so we can have consistency for all students, and that's the best way to get the best quality of education. But also enjoy some very well-deserved time this summer and a change of pace. And I thank you all for what you do to make a difference for students every day.